Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, an Israeli attack leaves a crater in one of Gaza's last safe zones.
Palestinians here are telling us they do not know where to go and nowhere is safe across the Gaza Strip.
The people and the weapons that killed them in al-Mawasi. I'm Natasha del Toro, and this is The Take. Al Jazeera's Hind Khudari is one of the few frontline journalists reporting from Gaza on the attack.
It was 12:20 a.m. when the Israeli forces carried out a massive attack here in Mawasi Khan Yunis, in this humanitarian, safe, designated area. This hole is after the Israeli forces targeted these makeshift camps with at least 5 Israeli airstrikes.
And as she reports, everything has been hard to recover. Civil defense teams are digging with their hands, uncovering clothes, tent fragments, slowly identifying those buried deep beneath the earth.
According to eyewitnesses here, they're saying that at least 20 camps, 20 tents, 20 families were living in this area. Now, what we also need to know is it took hours for the civil defense teams to rescue those Palestinians trapped under the sand. This time they were trapped under the sand. They were not trapped under the rubble. Now, according to the medical teams, they said that at least 60 Palestinians were also injured.
Although al-Mawasi was designated a safe zone by Israel, this is not the first attack on the area. It's been hit multiple times in recent weeks. For the Palestinians who have survived, the immediate challenge is figuring out their next steps and finding a safe place to go. That's if a safe place even exists.
The Israeli warplanes pounded us mercilessly. A seismic shake. We do not know where to go. We are living in tents. We miraculously survived the airstrike.
This is claimed to be a safe humanitarian zone, al-Mawasi, Khan Yunis. But in reality, these are all lies.
Many people were sleeping. There were many families there as well. So imagine being asleep and then a 1,000-pound bomb being dropped on the area.
Nils Adler is an Al Jazeera journalist based in Jordan's capital, Amman, now that Israel banned Al Jazeera from operating within its borders. So, Nils, can you describe for us al-Mawasi before the Israeli strike? Maybe you could tell us how many people were there, how densely packed was the area?
So al-Mawasi had been an agricultural area, so it's known as the breadbasket of Gaza before the war. And then quite early on in the war, the Israeli military declared it a so-called safe zone. So displaced Palestinians were supposed to go to this zone and it was supposed to be safe. Now, as the kind of areas that were deemed safe were reduced, the al-Mawasi became more and more packed. And because it had been an agricultural area, there hadn't been that much infrastructure there previously. So a lot of Palestinians went there. I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands. 90% of Palestinians in Gaza have been flimsy tents. As I said, there was no infrastructure. And in fact, Dr. Tedros, the head of the WHO, described the situation there back in November last year, I believe, as a recipe for disaster.
The proposal for a so-called safe zone at al-Mawasi is a recipe for disaster. Attempting to cram so many people into such a small area with such little infrastructure or services will significantly increase risks to health for people who are already on the brink.
So we're talking about an incredibly densely populated area with thousands of displaced Palestinians, many of them displaced multiple times, living in these flimsy tents.
Flimsy tents that I understand were also made of plastic, so very flammable materials.
Exactly, and that was also because that had been an agricultural area, so there'd been plastic casing for watering plants and so forth. So there's a huge amount of plastic, you're right.
Now, Our colleagues, Al Jazeera colleagues, have been in Gaza. They've been on the scene. What have they been seeing from the aftermath of this attack?
So our colleagues were on the scene pretty soon afterwards, and they described large craters, several meters deep, which indicated that there'd been some heavy bombs used on the area. The tents had been completely decimated. There were bodies buried underneath the sand and the rubble, sand because it's quite near to the sea. And there were kind of emergency workers and also civilians trying to extract bodies, some limbs from underneath the ground. So really, really horrific scenes.
Yeah, I understand that the scene was very chaotic, and these aren't just, any bombs. We're talking about 2,000-pound bombs that are landing on this area, right?
Exactly. So Sanad, Al Jazeera's fact-checking agency, actually looked at this afterwards, and it seems that 2,000-pound bombs were used. Now, the US has sent those bombs, and these bombs are called bunker busters. So they're designed to break through steel infrastructure. And if you imagine the kind of effect this would have on tents and civilians living in them, it's unimaginable. I just spoke to Tala. She's a 22-year-old Palestinian, and she was living in al-Mawasi.
Hi, I'm Salah. I'm from Gaza, Palestine, but I'm now displaced in al-Mawasi, place that they claim to be a safe area. We are living in a tent, spending our day searching for the basics of our lives and the very essential needs of any human being.
And she talked me through, what that was like. And of course, for us who haven't been through it, it's unimaginable. But she tried, and she said that everything stood still for a second. So there was an immense sound, which she said Palestinians, of course, have grown used to over so many months of war in Gaza.
The thing that was different this time, that the scene was so close. The gray dust and everything turning gray just in 1 second. The red flames all over you. And the sound of screams and crying. So, without being aware if the thing that is being bombed or people that are being bombed are your neighbors or maybe your relatives or maybe your family members. In these seconds, you feel like something is shutting you up. You can't say anything. You just stare, and I feel that I keep memorizing the things, the sounds.
After the break, the weapons behind the massacre. So, Nils, let's talk a little bit more about these bombs. As you said, we've seen 3-story deep craters in the aftermath of the attack. 3-story deep, something like 50 feet wide. I mean, this looks almost like a swimming pool carved into the ground. What do we know about the weapons that made those craters?
Yeah, so the Mark 84s are incredibly heavy bombs, and they were introduced by the US during the Vietnam War and have been used in successive wars afterward, including the war in Iraq. Now, they have been used on Gaza before by the Israeli military back in 2014, and they were met with a lot of international criticism for that, precisely because these bombs are not meant to be dropped on densely populated or, in fact, civilian populations at all. They're meant to be dropped on heavy, heavy infrastructure and designed to pierce steel infrastructure. So, that kind of bomb being dropped on a tent city, basically, with displaced Palestinians, there doesn't seem to be any military strategy behind these bombs being used. The Israeli military say they're going after Hamas fighters and Hamas commanders, and often they say that they're hiding amongst the civilians. But you see kind of the amount of Palestinian civilians that they're willing to kill, to just kill one Hamas commander. And you see in July the 13th, the Israeli military struck al-Mawasi, killing 90 Palestinian civilians.
Israel's attack on al-Mawasi, an area in Khan Yunis designated as a safe zone that killed at least 90 Palestinians, half of them women and children, and injured over 300 in one of the deadliest attacks in Gaza in weeks.
And they said that they'd killed Mohammed Daif. Since then, Hamas has said that he hasn't been killed. Now he is a leader of the military wing of Hamas. And I think there you see that the Israeli military are willing to kill 90 Palestinian civilians in order to go after one senior Hamas figure.
In an exclusive CNN interview back in May, President Joe Biden warned that these bombs should not be used on civilian zones.
Civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. And I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem.
So now that Israel has dropped this 2,000-pound bomb on this camp, what do we know about the U.S. reaction to the reported use of these bombs?
Well, after this particular incident, there doesn't seem to have been a reaction yet. However, the US have paused one shipment of these bombs, but thousands have been sent since the beginning of the war. And since that pause earlier in the year, they've actually sent another shipment. So it doesn't seem that there's any accountability for the Israeli military for using these type of weapons by the country that is supplying them.
Now, Nils, this isn't the first time that Israel has attacked what they've deemed a safe zone. It's not even the first time that Israel has attacked al-Mawasi specifically with these 2,000-pound bombs. And it's definitely not the first time that Israel has killed Palestinian civilians in the name of targeting Hamas members or officials. But clearly, a 2,000-pound bomb is not a precision weapon. What is needed for this to be the last time that this happens?
Well, I'm afraid I'm rather pessimistic about the future because there appears to be no accountability for this type of behavior by the Israeli military. The international court, the world court, has, made its decision towards Israel, and yet Israel continues to drop bombs on so-called safe zones that it declares as safe zones. So there needs to be some accountability. Now, the Israeli military says that it warns civilians about these operations. They'll send leaflets and they'll also ring them. But so many people we speak to on the ground say that they received no warning, or the communications were down, so they don't have the interconnection to receive that sort of information or signal. So the excuse that the Israeli military uses and tells its allies, including the US, who parrots the same excuse, seems to be continuing. So for this to end, I think there needs to be much, much more international pressure and not just a temporary pause on these type of weapons. But the US needs to send a signal that we will not provide these weapons if they're used in this way.
It's devastating that some weapon of this nature would be used on a displaced camp. And the other question is, they're saying that they drop leaflets telling people in advance, but many of these people were already displaced from Rafah, if I understand correctly. So where is there even left for them to go?
There is nowhere safe for Palestinians to go in Gaza, and the displaced Palestinians who I speak to say there is nowhere left to go. And al-Mawasi was supposed to be that last resort. And Tala, the survivor of the al-Mawasi attack, who I spoke to today, she said, there is nowhere left that is safe in Gaza right now.
I don't have anywhere to go. This is the last choice for us. It's either this place or death. It's either this place or the sea.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Chloe K. Lee and Ashish Malhotra, with Hisham Abu Salah, Hagir Saleh, Shraddha Joshi, Duha Mosaad, and me, Natasha del Toro, in from Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Plourde mixed this episode. Alexander Locke is the Take's executive producer, and Nate Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.